It's wonderful to have you here. Yes. All right. Welcome, everybody. And today I'd like to talk about how to give an awesome stakeholder presentation. And please know that I want this to be an open format. So you're more than welcome to raise your hand or ask questions as I go along. I really enjoy the two-way conversation. So the very first thing, we're talking about making a presentation to the shareholders. The very first thing that we need to know is, what is your objective? Why do you want to make this presentation? What is it that you want to talk about? What is it that you want to communicate? What is your message? I strongly suggest to write it down. Write it down. What is it that you want to communicate? Is it one subject matter? Perhaps there's a sub-subject matter as well. I would advise never more than two sub-subject matters. So one main one and two sub-subject matters. No more than that. And because the brain can't take it all in. And knowing why are you wanting to do this? So once you have your objective or your objectives written down and you know what it is that you want to communicate, what is the next thing? Well, the next thing is, who are you communicating to? So yes, we're communicating to our stakeholders, but who are our stakeholders? So just because they're stakeholders, it doesn't mean that you invite everybody. You invite the stakeholders that pertain to this subject matter. So you need to understand what matters to the stakeholders. And once you've done that, does it match? Do the stakeholders match the goals and the objectives of the presentation? So how do you know? How do you know which stakeholders to invite, which ones not to invite, or which ones just to keep abreast of what's going on? Hopefully you have a communication management plan. And there's a couple here that, just to give you an idea of having a list of all your key holders and what information do they want to know and how do they want to know this information and to what level. Some could be more detailed, while others is just the overview of it. And the next thing is create an agenda. So, and it's nice to give our stakeholders an agenda ahead of time, just so that they can prepare themselves and they can anticipate what the subject matter is going to be about, and perhaps that they will have questions. It gives them an opportunity to think of questions they're going to ask during the presentation, as well as you. It's really important for you to think of what questions are they going to ask me, and to prepare those as well. Perhaps you want to as well prepare a handout. Now, it is debatable. When do you hand out the handouts? Well, for myself, I think that if you are going to be talking about a lot of numbers, right, a handout at that point in time, I think is really important, so that each individuals could take a look at the details of the numbers. But perhaps it's just top level numbers, and it doesn't need to be seen in detail. So perhaps you want to give the handout at the end. So the idea is you give the handouts during the presentation when it is material that they need to read as you go along. If it's not material that they need to read as you go along, then handing out at the end of the presentation is a really good idea, because you want to make sure that they stay focused on you. We'll talk more about staying focused on you in just a moment here. I am thinking as well, thinking of your stakeholders. We do, and not just the stakeholders, but any time that you want to create a presentation and you want to present, right? We do have communication barriers. And the communication barriers here is a list, right? But it to make sure that you do acknowledge that there are perhaps a different background perhaps in language, or some different backgrounds in the noise level, like perhaps you are speaking to some stakeholders that are actually sitting in a construction site, right? And so just thinking of different barriers that you may have to deal with, and to deal with them as well. So here's a rule. The rule is keep it simple. Keep your presentation simple. I know a lot of people, when they do particularly PowerPoint presentations, what they like to do is they like to create animations. They like to have lots of pictures, backgrounds, and animation of text and so forth. The more animations that you give, the less focused your audience is going to be. And please remember as well, when is your presentation being done? Is it at 2 o'clock in the afternoon when everybody has had a lunch, perhaps even a heavy meal? Is it first thing in the morning, right? Because your audience is quite different. It's quite different at 9 a.m. in the morning versus 2 in the afternoon versus 4 p.m. in the afternoon, right? Think of the lulls that we all get at times. So the idea is here is to make it simple. Simple is better, especially when it's an important message you want to bring across. So it is the 10-20-30 rule. So best if it was 10 slides or less. Hard to do, I know, but 10 slides or less is best, as well as the wording, right? Bullet point format is awesome, simply because then you as a presenter could talk about each bullet. And so the audience is really focusing on you rather than a lot of text on the slide if you're presenting using PowerPoint, of course, right? Keep your presentation under 20 minutes. Difficult to do at times, I know. But the 10-20-30 rule for best in communications for sending out your message is 20 minutes. Use at least a 30-point font size, just so that everybody can read, right? They can see from far. So that's important as well. Now, what about your voice? I use my voice as a tool, by the way. I think of it as a tool. So your presentation, when you're using your voice, the exclamation marks, the strength of your voice, the gentleness of your voice at times. What about the pause? The pause of your voice as well. So do think of your voice as a tool. And I'll talk maybe a little bit more about that, okay? Body language, whether it is virtual or right on site in the presentation, body language, of course, is very important. We decide in less than 90 seconds visually if we like somebody, right? So the body language becomes really, really important, and not necessarily the material itself, it's the delivery of the material. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about body language in just a few minutes, but right now I'm focusing really on putting the presentation together. So we have the 10-20-30 rule. What's next? The first thing is your key message. So we know now what your objective is, what your message is, and perhaps, as I mentioned earlier, you may have 2 sub-messages as well to give, right? But what's next? What is your key message? Well, this is what I like to say, cut to the chase. Why? Because the stakeholders are busy people, and they want to hear what you have to say straight up and go dive right into it. So if you're presenting a scope, for example, you may want to frame, to frame the situation, right? And perhaps to the problem, and then to perhaps you want to aim to solve or outline the main objectives, right? The rest of the presentation should focus on how. How is the project going to meet the situation and solve the problem, whatever that problem is, right? So you identify the message, which is perhaps if it's a scope, you frame the problem, right? And then from there, how can we deal with it and perhaps what the solutions are. So here's the process of the presentation. Once again, keep your main ideas to 3 or fewer key points, right? So you start with a bang, you give them the message, right? You cut to the chase. And then you focus on how the project will be met, right? And meeting the objective or solving the problem. And then you finish your presentation by recapping the objective. Any questions, any comments so far? I can't see any hands here. So if there are, feel free, please, to jump right in. And the sun is coming out, as you can see. Ooh, all right. So how do you grab the audience? Storytelling is a fantastic way to grab an audience, right? Storytelling has been done from generation to generation through history of time, actually. So therefore, telling a little story about the situation, particularly if you can make your audience or make those stakeholders feel what's happening, get them involved in that story. That is really, really helpful. Storytelling is as well something that you remember. You remember more information through storytelling, actually, than the actual facts. So do share the experience that you've gone through, or perhaps share the emotion that's going through. Give them a story. It will really help your message to get through. Now, how are you going to do all of this? If you're uncomfortable about doing presentations, live presentations like on site or a presentation virtually, TED Talks are amazing for that, right? They give you, you'll get some really good examples on how to present. Practice. Once you have your presentation put together, practice. Practice is key. Practice makes perfect. So how do you practice? How do you practice? I am saying practice. I'm not suggesting to memorize your presentation, because that's not authentic. It won't feel good. It won't feel right. But practice perhaps in front of a mirror. Practice to other family members. If you want to use technology, Zoom itself has a recording. Practice recording yourself. And when you're looking at what you're doing, when you're looking back, if you're recording yourself, how is your language? How is your voice? How are your expressions? How are your mannerisms, for example, right? Because often, I should say, we have little tics. And so can you see those tics, for example? You could practice on PowerPoint. It has a recording, and you could practice your timing on PowerPoint, for example. So how do you engage and capture the audience attention? One of the to me, extremely important ways of doing that is, the first thing is to open up the palms of your hand. So when you're talking and you're opening up and people see the palms of your hand, they feel like you're authentic. They feel that they can trust you. When they feel that they can trust you, they listen more, and they listen more attentively. Show your enthusiasm, even if it's a bad message, even if you're delivering a bad message, show your enthusiasm about the project itself. You display your interest, display that you care. When that happens, your audience gravitates to you. It gravitates to what you have to say. People genuinely get excited in hearing what you have to say, get excited about your knowledge, and wanting to hear more about what you have to share. It's called the connection, right? So if you show that enthusiasm, if you show that interest, you display that you care, you will see that they genuinely will want to listen to you more, right? And respect and trust in what you have to say. So body language, yes. Body language is really interesting. As I mentioned to you, show the palms of your hands often, because it shows trust. It shows that you're being authentic, and therefore much easier for the audience to trust in you, right? So do that often, as much as you can. Move around. Of course, now I'm talking about being physical on site. Move around just very slowly, calmly, just a little bit here and there. Because if you just stand straight, particularly behind a podium, and you just stand straight, it feels like you have a barrier. And when you have a barrier, your communication becomes much limited. So therefore, move around. But what about if we're here virtually? I'm moving around. I'm moving my head. I'm moving my shoulders. I'm making hand signals. Well, I'm moving my hands around. So it shows that energy level, and it also shows that people are more apt to stay focused when you move a little bit here and there. But do make your movements slow and go along with the presentation as well. And avoid placing your hands if you're at a podium, on the table, on the podium itself, or on table if possible. Just carry your hands, shall we say. Make eye contact with the audience. Extremely important to make eye contact with the audience. If not, there will not be a connection. So move your head around and take a look, and take a look at your audience here. Even if it's virtual, I'm not seeing you right now. I'm seeing a couple of names, but that's it. But I'm not seeing you, and I know that you're there, right? So what am I doing? I am looking at the camera, right? So by looking at the camera, I know that I'm making eye contact with you. Very important, because it helps to bring in that trust, and it helps to show that connection, right? To get that connection going, because we do have to have a connection when we're doing a presentation. Use gestures and facial expressions to support moments. A gentle smile at times really helps. Even when your presentation is giving, not good messages, in the aspect that here's risk factors that we have come across, and how we're going to do those, how we're going to mitigate those risks, for example. But it's okay to use facial expressions to show your concern, for example, to show your focus, just to show support for that moment. And of course, smile at the appropriate time, right? And the reason I said the appropriate time is if we're talking about risk mitigation, it's not time to smile, perhaps, right? But do give a smile in the appropriate time. Again, it shows friendliness. It shows that you are approachable. Now, important, if you're standing, stand up straight, right? And it also shows when you're standing straight with your shoulders back, right? It shows that you're confident. You're taking space. You're taking space in the room. You're taking space on the screen, right? And keep your arms unfolded. I know some people say different things about arms that are folded, right? But that's a different class altogether, right? But keep your arms unfolded. It just shows confidence. Do not put them in your pockets, right? Because when you're putting them in your pocket, especially, if you've got keys or change in your pockets or whatever, it again, it shows that you're nervous. And so if you're nervous, it doesn't make me feel comfortable as being part of the audience. If you're nervous as a stakeholder, it doesn't make me feel comfortable, perhaps, with the suggestions of problem solving that you may have. So you do need to look confident, right? A presentation, I know a lot of people don't think about it that way, but I like to think of it as a two-way conversation. And you're communicating information, but you also can as well take this opportunity, right, to gather information from the other parties, right? So I like to think of it as a two-way conversation. And it's a good time as well to be able to get at least a way through getting an agreement or the beginnings of an agreement. I've got a little quick tip here. It's worth brainstorming what questions you're likely to receive from your audience, right? And I think that's really important as well, because it shows that you're prepared and you've got answers to some of those questions, right? And again, that shows confidence that you have in giving them answers, right? Any comments so far? Jump in. Da, 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 da. Very quiet. Okay.
I like the interaction that you're talking about with the audience. It engages them immediately, makes it more meaningful for them and more authentic. And, I just think that characteristic alone of the many you've described make for a superior presentation.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much for that comment. And as well, as I mentioned earlier, stakeholders are very, very busy people, right? Very busy people. So with your comments, I'm thinking it makes it more valuable. Their time, their 20 minutes has been well spent. So I like that. I like the idea that, okay, I've given a presentation for 20 minutes and the 20 minutes was well spent on all levels. Now, we are visual people. By the way, thank you so much, Philip, on that comment. We are visual people. And so putting graphics in your presentation, I find really helps. It could be infographics, it could be charts, it could be photograph, videos, if appropriate. It could be drawings, right? Now, if it makes things, here's a little quick tip though. If it makes things difficult or more complex in a way, then don't do it. Keep it simple, right? If it's a video and it's difficult to access, or there's sound issues or whatever the situation is, then let it be. If it's charts and you're wanting to make automation out of your charts, maybe it might be more simple just to give a simple chart. And speaking of charts, I know that pie charts don't give a lot of information. It's just a visual, right? But I have to tell you that stakeholders love pie charts, right? Gantt charts as well, and also pie charts. Yes. So once you've done your presentation and you have practice, critique it. Take a look at it, critique it, or get somebody to critique it for you, right? And perhaps change it a little bit or whatever it needs modified, or maybe you're happy with it. When you're presenting, support your audience. And what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is be honest, right? Be authentic. I have to tell you for myself, I have been presenting and teaching and training for many years, as Kevin said, or Alana said, or a little over 20 years, right? It is unbelievable when you stand in front of people that they can see right through you. So therefore, be honest, because they'll know, and I promise you they will know that you're not honest. So be honest, be authentic. And as I mentioned earlier, use your voice as a tool. Connect with your audience through eye contact, right? As well as that two-way conversation. Now, always talk to your audience. Do not, instead of talking at them, do not talk at them. You're going to lose your audience. You're going to lose their interest. You're going to lose their focus, right? And that trust and that connection isn't going to happen easily. So do talk to your audience and not at them. And it's hard to say, but yes, at the end of the day, do enjoy yourself, right? Do enjoy yourself. Show that you are enjoying working on this project, that no matter how many headaches you have, right? That you care, right? So it's going to make your presentation much better if you are relaxed and enjoying yourself. So how do you relax? You relax when you feel confident. When you do not feel confident, you do not relax. When you feel prepared, you relax. If you haven't prepared yourself, you don't feel relaxed. So preparation is really key to feeling relaxed. Preparation is really key to feeling confident, right? And that will make your presentation much better. Now, if you're feeling anxious beforehand, right? It does say here to, stand straight, right? And place your feet and shoulders and fists apart, your chin held high and soft to increase your confidence and your nerves. Believe it or not, a big stress reliever is the smell of oranges. So if you're going to do a major presentation that it's dependent on a lot of things, bring yourself an orange, peel it and just leave it on your desk, or just leave it near you so that you can smell the orange. It will help to de-stress you. Yes. I see a chat here. I'm just going to take a look and see if that's a question. And please feel free to ask questions or make comments, right? Oh, thank you very much, Karen. Karen is saying these are good tips. Awesome. Thank you so much. Good tips. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions? What about sharing an experience, a fantastic experience that you've had using these tips? And perhaps you have tips that you can share with others. Anybody? No? Okay. Let me ask you then, what about the do not do that you've experienced, right? Oh, please don't do that. No, I've experienced that. I'll share with you a do not do. As I mentioned earlier, videos and so forth, right? Well, firstly, if you're going to show a video, make sure that because you can use videos, particularly, I don't know, if you're doing a project and you're on a construction site and perhaps you want to do a video to show certain things, right? Just making sure that it's in the same, that is obtainable, and you know where it is, and it's obtainable through your files easily. But if it does have sound, making sure that, particularly if it's on site, I've had situations where we were working with videos, but we didn't have speakers. And so without speakers, just the laptop itself wasn't much of help. So therefore, again, having your technology all set up really helps. I see that Mr. Richardson has raised his hand.
Well, I have a story, an anecdote to tell that's quite personal, actually, to Miss Papillon and myself. Mrs. Papillon Richardson. Now, I was invited to give a keynote address at the LinkedIn North American Sales Conference, and so. This is a point of involving personalization and never failing to give credit where credit is due. So they were very tightly scripted. They wanted to know everything I was going to say, and they were watching me very closely while I was saying it, and because they're afraid of what I might have said, perhaps. But anyway, we came to a point near the end of the presentation, and I said, there's one thing I would like to offer up. That is a special addition here. And I said, firstly, I'd like you to give credit where credit's due. And I asked Danielle to stand up. She did. And I said, it was when I was in China that I reached out I wanted to reach out to Danielle to find a way to talk with her. This is before we were married. And finally, I hit on the one route I could do, and that was she was a member of LinkedIn. And so I reached out via LinkedIn to arrange for a dinner, and the rest is history. We're now married. But anyway, in the saying of that anecdote, all of the people from LinkedIn, you could see them breathing in and holding their breath. But meanwhile, because Danielle was standing up, they gave us a standing O. So anyway, that's never failed to give credit where credit is due.
Well, thank you, Philip, for that. Yes, that's fond memories you brought back. And yes, it was quite interesting. Yes, thank you. I have here on the chat where someone in their early career took acting classes, right? And it was designed to help corporate presenters better usage of the stage and gestures. Thank you very much for that. I'd like to talk a little bit about that because that's so important. I like to say to use space. How do you use space? Well, using space is being able to stand up straight, shoulders back, with that confidence. So you could use space sitting down, right? You could use space standing up. And when you show that space, well, people feel it and people move. They actually, I've tested this out on Yonge Street, right, where there's lots of people, and I stand straight, shoulders back, and I walk with confidence, and I do not move, meaning from side to side. And when I walk, people actually move to let me go through. That's really shows, it's an example of how really incredible using space, how important it is, because it gives you, it shows confidence and it shows authority. And so when you're doing that presentation, you really want to show that confidence and that you know what you're talking about and whatever suggestions you're making, so forth and so on, right? It gives credibility to it. But thank you, Phil, for that. That's awesome. Yes. Anybody else? Anybody else? Any tips? Any tips? Thank you very much. Excellent. Thank you. Here's another tip where if I'm doing a presentation, what about nerves, right? Well, sometimes I do get nervous. Yeah, absolutely. Just because I've done it often, it doesn't mean that you don't get nervous. One of the techniques that I use is, of course, I've prepped, I'm organized, I'm ready, I feel confident, but I'm still nervous. So therefore, if it is a room of people, right, what it is that I do, I make sure that I'm there early, I make sure that technology is there, right? It's all that the technology is checked and everything is okay. And then I stand near the door, and when people are coming in, I introduce myself. So therefore, what happens is I get to chit chat with people, and I get to find out who they are, and just that little bit of connection. And that makes me feel relaxed. So by the time that I do give my presentation, I feel much more relaxed. So that's another tip that, for me, it's a big one, because at times for me, there are times you do get nervous, right? So last chance for questions or comments or sharing. This is an opportunity to share an experience or a tip that perhaps would help us. No? Okay, well, I thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate your time, right? Whoops. I really appreciate your time. That's awesome. And thank you so much.
Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of your conference.